Episode 2. I'm glad you came back. Or if this is the first episode you're listening to, I recommend you go back and listen to episode 1 of Give and Receive with I'm Brian Potts.
I'm Elizabeth Pyjov.
Yeah, say that again because I talked over you.
Oh, I'm Elizabeth Pyjov.
Great. So I'm really excited. This is my favorite talk that I've heard Elizabeth give. And it's about this awful little thing that sits on your shoulder in those movies and looks like you and tells you bad stuff all the time. What do we call it?
The inner critic, our inner critic.
Yeah, we got to kill that little guy or girl, or they, whatever.
Or be so kind to it that it dies on its own.
Oh, compassionate to death. I like that. All right, so Elizabeth's gonna do a little, a pretty detailed explanation of the inner critic and why this matters. And again, science of the mind will blow your mind. And then we're gonna get into a few stories about the inner critic, and I'm gonna share at the end a way that we try to always do a give and receive at the end. So an example of giving and then receiving something. And in this case, since we're talking about the inner critic, we thought I could tell a story about how silencing the inner critic, giving to myself, led to me receiving a lot of benefits. So with that, take it away. Let's kill that critic.
Yeah, I'm excited I'm excited to speak about inner critic, especially on this podcast, because this podcast is about that crossroads between success and compassion and happiness. And when people hear about compassion, they don't think that includes compassion towards yourself. And the way that we tear ourselves apart is really that voice in our head. So I'm excited to talk about this here because people who want to grow a business tend to be self-critical. Top lawyers, financial professionals, top people in any field are actually very self-critical. All people are self-critical. And that's the opposite of wise leadership of self. And we need to lead ourselves well to lead others well. And we need to not fall into certain thinking traps. And the biggest thinking trap, like there's catastrophizing, there's taking things personally, but the biggest thinking trap is actually inner critic. And self-compassion is what helps. So let me give you a very non-scientific definition of the inner critic first. And really what the inner critic is the voice that makes you miserable. So it's non-technical, but I think it's very accurate. It's a voice that makes you procrastinate. It's a voice that's really not objective, and it makes you feel like you're not enough no matter what happens. So like, let's say today you listen to this podcast and you eat 3 healthy meals and you get on top of your whole inbox, which I think Brian can agree is basically impossible. It's like a heroic act if you get on top of your inbox. And you cross off everything on your to-do list, and you're kind to everyone, and you work out, and you're in bed by 9:30, you're in bed early. What's that voice in your head going to say? Brian, what's that voice going to say in your head? Like,
it's going to say so many bad things. Although I told you, I've already silenced my inner critic, or at least tried my best to silence the inner critic. I still hear it sometimes, but I'm like, go away, buzz off. But yeah, so maybe I'm not the best example. What do you got?
Well, usually the inner critic is like, yes, but you should have done that better.
Oh,
like, yes, you did all those things, but you should have done it faster or with slightly better quality. Or yes,
or you didn't do enough of things. That's
exactly.
my inner critic. If I'm thinking about something, it's what are the things that I could have done that I didn't?
Right. Like, what about that side business you thought of starting 2 years ago? Why didn't you do that today? Or like that pantry in the back, like that back closet, that back pantry, you should have cleaned that out. Or yes, you traveled and you gave a presentation, but you should have packed better and taken more picture.
Or gone to sleep earlier so that I could get better rest. And then the critic goes, oh, if you've gone to sleep earlier, then you get better rest. And pretty soon it's 2 a.m.
Or like that one phrase in that one contract, let me just fix that now instead of sleeping. That thought process of like everything should always be better, it just takes a lot of energy away, and it detracts from our focus, it detracts from our success, it detracts from our resilience. Like, people think, let me tear myself to pieces and then I'll be more successful. But in reality, that critical voice isn't giving you instructions that any human being can actually follow. Like, that inner critic wants you to have no blind spots whatsoever, no limits whatsoever, and it wants everything to be like cuter, more successful, and like wrapped up in a nice little bow and attractive from the outside. And we all know that that's not how life is. So, first point, that voice is unreasonable. Listening to it doesn't actually help you. It's like a coach that only yells at you and is always, always harsh every second and doesn't give you any useful advice. And the way this inner critic speaks to you is through frustration and disappointment and aggression and like really being a drama queen.
Anxiety.
It's kind of aggression that's not expressed in any other way. Like, in the good old days, people had duels, things were much more physical, people had ways of expressing aggression. Now we do it through judging and criticizing. And the more people around you and your environments are critical, the more you're critical of yourself. That's why, like, a whole law firm will hire me to work with all the different people in that law firm on inner critic, because the voices you hear on the outside change your inner voice. So really, when you talk to people, you form their inner voice too. So a lot of people, especially people who are motivated, who are successful, who are achievers, who want to do things, they don't think that self-compassion is important, or they don't know anything about self-compassion. Let us know in the comments if you've never done a self-compassion practice. We're going to do one today. I was new to self-compassion once too, and we want to tell stories on this podcast, so I'll tell you my story. I've been exposed to many environments prone to cultivating the inner critic in my life. I think I was almost uniquely positioned to have a very strong inner critic. I was born in post-Soviet Union Russia, which was a culture of enormous perfectionism. So in that culture, the value placed on human life is very, very low then and still. So, like, if you're not the best ballerina, if you're not the best chess player, if you're not the best gymnast, or at least the best mathematician, if you're not like in the top 0.001% of those fields, like, you're nothing, you're no one, you don't even matter. And that was kind of the mentality, and that's the first mentality I was exposed to. Like, you don't matter, your feelings don't matter, your wishes don't matter, just be the best. That was kind of Soviet Union. And then when I was 6 years old, my parents immigrated to California. So I grew up in very much an immigrant family. Like, I grew up with my parents not speaking English, with my dad working the night shift at a gas station to support the family. And I thought, let me just be perfect, let me cause no problems, let me cause no stress. And just imagine transitioning from Soviet Union Russia to like Silicon Valley, boom, California, Palo Alto area. No
Same.
two cultures could ever be more different. So I remember like going to a school where I'd sit up straight, I'd have these little braids. I'd kind of greet the teacher by getting up. We'd be doing like hard math at 6 years old, and in that Russian class. And then I get to a California kindergarten, and there's like kids running around in their pajamas, like painting with their hands, throwing cupcakes. I'm
Hacky
like,
sacks. You probably saw some hacky sacks.
like, what is happening? Like, why is everyone sitting on the ground? I was taught to never sit on the ground. Why are people eating with their hands? I was taught to never eat with their hands. So what that led to is a period of trying to assimilate, and that kind of trying to assimilate also strengthens the inner critic so much. And then eventually I was like, oh, this is fine. I get to do really, really fun things at school, and my parents never know, and they can never criticize me for it. And I have all this freedom that I never have at home, because at home it was still like strict Soviet Russia. So that was the source of the inner critic, kind of trying to fit into a whole new culture. Then I kind of started speaking English. By the time I was in fifth grade, I was president of the student council. I had lots of friends, but there is that point of thinking, oh, there's something wrong with me if I'm not like other people. That's the critical voice. Then I spent 8 years as a Harvard student getting 3 different degrees, also environments of huge perfectionism, and 2 years studying neuroscience at Stanford. And it wasn't until I was at Stanford Medical School that I was introduced to self-compassion. And I was reading a lot of research, and research was being done at the center that I was working for. And I saw the research that being kind to yourself actually gets you much further. and that the perfectionist is just another version of the inner critic, and that it's a voice we can rewrite. And I found that so inspiring. I saw there's concrete practices to get there. And that's when I became much, much happier. And it made it much easier to be in law school. It made it much easier to be an associate at Sidley Austin, and made it much more easy it made it much easier to launch my own business and run my business. And there's really nothing that's brought me more inner lightness and more confidence and more enthusiasm than freedom from the inner critic. And it's a tool also for professional success. So I'm really excited today to tell you more about it, because we all have that voice. Like, we all have that voice of like, not good enough, or I could have done better, or put in the comments to today's put in the comments of today's podcast like what your inner critic says. But usually it like takes other people and compares yourself unfavorably to them, like all these other people are doing so much better. And this social comparison actually looks like physical pain in the brain. It like looks at yourself in the mirror, notices all the flaws in your face. It thinks that people saying nice things to you are just being nice and just being polite. Brian,
this is science. That's the beauty of this. Like, and I know you're going to get into it a little bit more, but that's what was really eye-opening to me, is that there's scientific literature that has looked at this a lot.
Yes.
And is pretty definitive. This isn't like, a questionable thesis.
Yeah, let's talk about the science. So according
Yeah.
to we have 60,000 to 80,000 thoughts per day. 80% of those thoughts are negative. And most
80?
of those, 80,
You said 80, right?
80%. Yeah. And most of those are negative against yourself. So most of those thoughts are self-critical. So first of all, what a heavy burden to bear. Second of all, it's hard to be really, really compassionate to others if you're constantly thinking critical thoughts about yourself, because kind of the emotion at hand is not compassion. The emotion at hand is kind of this harshness. And it's not really objective. To be successful, to be a leader, you need to be connected to reality. Like,
hold on. 80%, and then you're talking about everyone, right? This isn't just you or me. This is every human on earth.
Except the people who consciously cultivate mindfulness and compassion, self-compassion, everyone else on earth, 80% are negative out of those 60,000 thoughts.
So that's a lot of negative thoughts.
That's many, many, many thousands. And it's usually directed against yourself. So first of all, like, ouch. And second of all, it's not even realistic. Usually 75% of our lives are going well. So another study suggested that in a given day, we have 3 times more positive experiences than negative ones. And so if we were really accurate, if our thoughts were a reflection of reality, we'd have 75% positive thoughts and 25% negative. But it's basically flipped. So
it's amazing more people don't like run into oncoming traffic, or I mean, that's mind blowing. So why? Hold on a second. Why?
Why do we have so many thoughts?
Yeah, why? That can't, like, natural selection should have got rid of that.
So natural selection actually selected for those kinds of thoughts. So to get the answer of why this happens, we need to go way back in the jungle when like human roamed the jungle with other wild beasts, and we had to compete with those wild animals for resources and for survival.
I'd be dead. I'm skinny, not strong, and can't see very well without context.
So humans weren't very strong, couldn't run very fast, couldn't fly, could kind of swim, but not very well. Why did we survive? It's because we have these minds formed over thousands of years of evolution that are wired to look for what's wrong. It's our difficult brains that are wired to look for what's wrong in every situation that actually gave us a shot at survival. So our minds are made to underestimate the level of resource and overestimate the level of threat in any situation. And what's our greatest resource? It's like give and receive. Our greatest resource are ourselves, like our work ethic, our creativity, our intelligence, and other people. Mm-hmm. So we usually think that other people support us less than we do. We usually think that other people support us less than they do. And we usually think that we're less skillful and less awesome than we are. So we're like, for example, if your romantic partner does exactly the same amount of dishes as you on a weekly basis. Let's say you do 30 dishes a week and they do 30.
Highly unlikely, but okay, that I would do that many.
Even if you both do the same amount, you think that your partner did less, because we always think people are doing less for you than they do. So
Ah,
our minds are what, so this is, we were talking about gratitude in the last podcast. This is why gratitude is so important, because our minds always underestimates how much other people do for us as well. And we have these minds that just look for threats. Like you'll imagine a tiger in the bushes, even if there's no tiger. Just like maybe in today's market, you'll think you're about to get laid off, even when you're not. And at first, early humans looked for these threats everywhere, but they were still pretty happy because they lived in the present moment. So they would imagine threats, but those threats would still be in the present. And
mhm.
this was when we had our old brain, which was formed about 25 million years ago. And the old brain wanted to keep us protected. It could process some emotions. It wanted us to survive, but that was about it. And then the human brain began to grow and evolve. And about 2 million years ago, human beings developed this incredible capacity to imagine. We got this ability to imagine, and that gave rise to language and to culture and to science and technology and our sense of identity and the whole system of law. But in terms of happiness, it was a disaster because we had an old brain wired to look for threats, and now we have a new brain that could project those threats into the future with no limit of scope whatsoever. Um, and then our minds, this is another very interesting scientific fact. Our minds are not good at telling the difference between the real and the imagined. So some things our minds can do, but some things our minds are really, really bad at. So if you have a thought, your mind reacts as if that thought is real. If you remember a threatening experience, your body reacts as if it's happening right now. So that's where most of our stress comes from. It doesn't come from things that are actually happening. It comes from potential threats that we imagine that may or may not materialize, or like, why did I do that 20 years ago? Why did I say that 10 years ago? And we replay that. And this, we're unlucky there. We're very different from other mammals. Like if some cow were grazing peacefully in a meadow, and let's say like a mountain lion started chasing that cow, and let's say that cow like ran and ran, and the cow was in awesome shape, and the cow got away from the mountain lion, like within 2-3 minutes, the cow would go back to grazing peacefully again. Its heart rate would return to normal. No more adrenaline would be produced. But let's say we had like
A human.
a human, like a legal mentor network event or a give and receive podcast event in Central Park in New York City, and we're all picnicking, and like the Central Park Zoo's mountain lions got free to attack us, and let's say they're attacking us and we ran, and like the fire department gets involved, and we're all safe, we all managed to escape. We would not go back to laying on that grass. We would probably still need therapy 20 years later to process that experience of what could have happened. And our bodies will react as if it's real every single time we remember it. So
Well,
that,
so I think I want to hammer home because we got to do the business side. I got the business side of this, and when I'm listening to this, the thing that jumps to my mind the most is that I talk to a lot of startup founders, and I talk to a lot of people who have ideas about starting companies. And almost always their first reaction is, I can't do that. How would I be able to do that? Like negative self-doubt, self-critic. It's that inner critic, and they're saying, you can't do this. And then a lot of people, they listen to that inner critic and they don't do it.
yeah. So we always underestimate how much we can do. We always underestimate the level of resource. So you almost need to rewire that voice before you can move forward. We'll talk about the inner critic more in a future episode, but I really want to hear your story.
Ooh, well, I don't know if I want to get into my story, but I guess I can tell it. So, first of all, before I tell the story, I want to make one additional point, and I think it dovetails nicely with this discussion and obviously the compassion discussion that we had on the first episode. So, one way I like to look at the world, and I'm just one human, look at the world however you want, but I'd like to learn from other people. And so, this is how I think about things. And I kind of like to look at everyone. I don't care if you went to college. I don't care if you went to high school. I don't care if you went to Harvard and got 18 degrees. I think everyone is good at something. And what that thing is is what drives your success in our society. But that's a random thing that's decided by our society of which trait, that DNA that you happen to have, we're going to societally self-select and put the people at the top or the bottom, right? But we're all just DNA. That is random. That, you know, Elizabeth happens to be amazing at the science of the mind, and she worked hard. And I'm not trying to undervalue that, because she's amazing and brilliant. But lots and lots and lots of people who didn't get any formal education are brilliant at specific things that they might do. And so when you look at the world, and what I try to do is that anyone I interact with, I never prejudge them, never. And I always want to help them. And what I find is that I want to lift everyone around me up. And if I do that, I know I will lift myself up. And so I try to never compare myself to other people, because it's not possible. We're all different. Every single human on earth is different. Full stop. There's no dispute about that. And so really, when you're comparing yourself to other people, you're always comparing apples and oranges. Always. No matter what, from the start. So don't do it. Now, does that mean, of course, you see people doing things and you want to emulate their behavior? Of course you should do that. That's learning. But that is not the inner critic. And if you think about it the way that I think about it, which is anyone I interact with, no matter how rich and important or how not rich and important they are, I treat them the same. I assume they have value to this earth. I don't know what that value is, but I try to find out, usually in dealing with them or in helping them. And then when you do that and you just do it all the time, it will make you feel better about yourself, because you're never comparing yourself to anyone else.
I just want to say that that's so beautiful, and those are words to live by for all of us.
So I wasn't always of this mind state. I honestly think that the DNA that mattered the most to me and my success, the random DNA that I got, is that I have the ability to learn and change my behavior. And so I've been doing that since I was a kid. And I wasn't always of this belief. In fact, I can pinpoint and have pinpointed way before I met Elizabeth. I could tell you exactly when I silenced my inner critic. I didn't even know that I had an inner critic. But when I was in college, a 19-year-old, and this is before, what's that crazy word you use? Amygdala. I could never spell that.
Amygdala.
The amygdala, before, now I know that male brains aren't fully grown until they're 24. Probably would have been useful information when I was 19 making these decisions. But my good friend, roommate, college roommate, and I at 19 decided we were going to do an abroad program in Merida, Mexico. We were in a small school in Kentucky. And Merida, Mexico, if you don't know, is down by Cancun in the Yucatan. So literally the very bottom, as far away from the US border as you can get in Mexico. And we decided to drive my friend Jake's I might get the year wrong, 88 Volkswagen Jetta from Louisville, Kentucky to Merida, Mexico as two 19-year-olds. Our parents were not happy, or at least my parents weren't. They were supportive, but scared shitless. And off we go. And so I spent 15 days in a car with Jake, the two of us, being total dumbasses. I barely spoke Spanish, and Jake spoke Spanish, but had never actually been in a Spanish-speaking country before. So that makes it different. And we're driving through the desert of Mexico, and Jake's blaring Bob Dylan, who I hated at the time, but have learned that he was right and I was wrong. And we're getting in an argument, I think, about Bob Dylan. And Jake says to me, "Why are you always so critical?" Those were the words. And I was like hit in the face. I was like, "What do you mean? I'm not critical." I never thought of it that way. But then when he was very on. Jake is one of those people who I've tried to emulate this trait of just being super honest with people about them, even if it's a hard truth.
And
And
that's compassion, and that
yeah,
is compassionate.
and there's a time for that. Obviously, you don't just meet somebody and say the hard truth right at the beginning. But we knew each other well. I really respected Jake at the time, as much as a 19-year-old can respect anybody. And he was like, "You're super critical. Most of the things you say are joking or are focused on negative attributes of other people or are criticisms of other people." And that just like hit me in the face because I was like, that's not what I want. That's the opposite of what I want. I had no idea I was doing that. And that moment in my life, literally years later, I have pointed when I was 30, when I was married, when I got married at 27 or whatever. Many, many, many times I've told people that was the moment at which I cognitively decided I wasn't going to be critical of anyone, or I was going to try not to. Now, obviously, that's not possible, but we have emotions, and I can be an asshole if I need to be. I am a lawyer, but that was it. And so I feel incredibly lucky that I had a friend who was, at the time, I would have called him an asshole, but who was honest and forthright and just wanted to help me, and told me basically stop it. And I did. And
Yeah.
it's been life changing.
Okay, so now we're telling you, stop it. You're much more smart and much more successful and much more skillful and a better person than you think. And it's just that the default of the human brain is suffering, and the default of the human brain is criticism. But we can get out of that trap, and I hope that now you'll notice it more.
And what are some ways, like practically, I think it'd be good to give some of the listeners, and I know you have these, some ways to do that. I mean, it's one thing I think the first part is just knowing that when you have these thoughts, that's every human has them, and 80% of them are critical and probably not true.
Exactly. Just one, knowing that it's a thinking trap. Two, knowing that whatever your biggest area of strength is ironically where the inner critic shows up the most. So when I work with like a top partner at a top firm who's so good at a certain transaction and has been doing it for 25 years and is the expert on it, he thinks, well, the regulations will shift just a little bit and I won't have a job and everyone will realize I don't actually know what I'm doing. Or I worked with like a top woman in Hollywood, and she's like sex symbol, gorgeous, glowing. And what her inner voice says is, I'm not as beautiful today as I was yesterday, or I'm not as beautiful today as I was last year. And I found that heartbreaking. But I've noticed that whatever your greatest area of strength is where your inner critic shows up the most. So kind of reverse engineer that. Notice what you're most critical about. Like if you're most critical about you being a parent, it probably means you're a good parent. So know that it's the reverse. The core practices for conquering the inner critic or easing the inner critic is mindfulness, awareness of the present moment, and starting a daily mindfulness practice. And if you don't know how to do that, email me. We'll figure it out together. Compassion, wishing for the long-term well-being of yourself and others, including all your difficult people. And of course, your most difficult person is like you yourself. So self-compassion. Self-compassion is this attitude that no matter what, I'll be on my own side. No matter what, I'll speak kindly to myself. And my value as a human being has nothing to do with anyone's approval or disapproval. So that's self compassion. The inner critic is just the opposite, right? It's always disappointed, always irritated, always a drama queen, always in a bad mood. But self compassion is when you know that no matter what, I'm still going to be kind to myself. And that is so liberating. And this kindness to yourself doesn't mean like you eat all the pizza you want. That's self-indulgence. It means like I will stay committed to my long-term goals. So like what are my long-term goals, and not letting the inner critic kind of move you out of those long-term goals.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. The self silencing the self critic doesn't mean everything you think that's negative about yourself you should ignore. it means you need to think critically about whether that's actually true and know that the chances are very good that it's not, and you're just being self-critical. I think I want to kind of remind everybody and bring this together with the show's purpose. So the podcast is called Give and Receive, not Give to Receive, as we talked about on the first episode. And the idea, or it's not an idea, I think it's fact, but is that if you help people without intent, good things will happen. You will get success in life, you will become more successful, and you will be happier. And this episode, which is intentionally one of the second episode, is about making sure that you do that to yourself, because you can't help others if you haven't already helped yourself. If you are not comfortable in your own skin, it is really hard. That will come through when you talk to others. Now, you should still do the give and receive, but you should work on both. And really try to silence that inner critic, and just remember that anytime you're thinking, like right now, this guy might not know what he's talking about, or Elizabeth doesn't know, or this won't work for me, I can't do this. That's the inner critic. And you just need to recognize it at first. You don't need to change it all at once. And, I'm not a mindfulness person. I'd never done mindfulness practices until I met Elizabeth. I have started, but I'm not as good at doing it as I should be. But these are not go sit in a room for 3 hours and close your eyes and, you know, not think of anything. That's not what this is. These are very short things that you can do, literally as little as 10 to 15 minutes a day. And there are studies that I've seen that Elizabeth shows, and we'll, I'm sure, get into some of these, where you do that 10 to 15 minutes a day, you literally have better health.
Exactly. So you can strengthen a bicep, for example, by just lifting weights for 10, 15 minutes a day, right? If you were to lift 20 pounds for 10 to 15 minutes a day, your bicep would become really, really strong. And people think like, oh, I need to meditate for like 3 hours or 4 hours to become self-compassionate, to become mindful. It's the same 10, 15 minutes a day. Think of it as like training just for the mind. Any thought you think consciously, the mind will repeat on its own without you trying to do anything. So anything you do with the mind replicates on its own. So if you do something for like 10, 15 minutes, the mind will keep doing that. If for 10, 15 minutes you're present and you set a compassionate intention towards yourself and you set a compassionate intention towards others, that will be the state of your mind going forward. So we'll also get into exactly how to do that in future episodes. But for now, just set the intention that no matter what happens, I'll still be kind to myself. If I hear that critical voice, let me reframe that, but as an observation. An observation is just taking the drama out of it. Like you can look at the weather and say, oh no, it's 100 degrees again. I live in such an awful place. I'm going to be sweating. This is miserable. Why is it 100 degrees? Or you can say like, oh, it's 100 degrees out. It's hot. It's just like a flat out statement. So kind of take the drama out of it. Inner critic is facts plus drama. And observation is just facts. Or self-compassion is facts plus kindness or facts plus equanimity. You want to kind of go into the observation or even kind of the self-compassion way.
What's equanimity?
Equanimity is like you can be at peace with the current reality. Like being at peace with it doesn't mean that you don't want things to change for the better ever, but you can also accept current reality fully, because that's what we have. And that's like always the launching pad for a better reality.
I love that. It's amazing. I think so we'll wrap up the show today. I want to give a little bit of a preview of what's coming. So if you listen to the first episode, you probably heard me say that I have a habit of meeting with a lot of people, 4 to 6 a day often, and helping them for free without any intention of getting anything. And I do this every day. And most of the time, the people ask me are very surprised. Your time is so valuable. Why do you do this? Or thanks so much for doing this. And what I've learned to say, or just started saying, is this is the most valuable time I spend. And they don't believe me, but that's what I'm going to say because I believe it. And then the other thing that I often see is I tell them I've learned that if I help 100 people for free with no reason or expectation of getting anything in return, 10 of them will come back and do something amazing to change my life, or hire me as a lawyer, or whatever it is, or make a podcast with me. And so, but this is the thing that I think I didn't learn until I was in Italy and started doing some of this science of the mind with Elizabeth. I would say that, and 98% of the people I meet would look at me like deer in the headlights, or like I was a crazy person. Like, yeah, only you can do that kind of look, except one specific type of people who always respond, yeah, obviously you should do that. And what I figured out is that the ones who said, yeah, obviously you should do that, were the most successful people that I was talking to. They were the top salesperson, or the founder who had raised tons of money, or literally people running hundreds of billions of dollars worth of investments. All of those people were like, yes, obviously you should just meet with people and help them for free. And so when I started encountering that, and with Elizabeth's Buddhists and science of the mind, that's really what brought this together, I think, for me, is that the proof, again, was right in front of me. Mm. And once I sort of noticed it, I was like, shit, why don't everyone should know this? This is like a superpower that nobody knows about. And so what we're going to do going forward is we're going to invite some of those successful people on to the show. We're going to interview them about how they've become successful, and we're going to have them tell a story about giving and receiving. And hopefully, if you listen to a few more episodes, you will come around and fully believe, like I do, that this is the easiest pathway to success and happiness. Not going to Harvard Law School and getting all A's, not starting a company and making it a unicorn. It's really simple and anyone can do it. And if you do it, good things will happen. It might take a little while. It's not going to happen overnight, but do it for 6 months or a year and watch what happens. So with that, I think anything else you want to add on the self-critic? Did we kill it?
Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. Know that you have so much more to offer than your inner critic will say. And keep doing things with that intention of self-compassion, and then you'll be able to help a lot more people. Those are the kind of the last words for this topic for now.
I love it. Well, episode 2, and Elizabeth keeps coming back. She hasn't ghosted me yet, so I feel honored, and can't wait to show our first guest, have our first guest on episode 3.
And we'll also keep talking about self-compassion and inner critic because it's so important, and we've just scratched the surface. So we'll see you next time.
Awesome.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.